That night, I meant to eat pizza and feel sorry for myself. Instead, I accidentally summoned a demon. The rain had been sulking against my windows all evening, the cheap bulb in the kitchen doing its best impression of a dying star. My apartment smelled like wet socks and basil. A cardboard box of pepperoni, extra cheese, zero dignity steamed on the coffee table. Next to the other bad decision of the night, a tarnished brass amulet I'd bought from a flea market vendor who swore in 3 languages it was authentic. Authentic what, he hadn't said. I'm Aiden Kim, 27, freelance designer, professionally underpaid and recently betrayed. My ex, Oliver, had cheated on me with a smile like a magazine ad and the moral backbone of a breadstick. I had been determined not to think about him. So I did what any adult would, poured wine into a mug, and told myself a stupid joke of a ritual would be cathartic. The scrap of paper that came with the amulet had ink slashes on it that looked like someone coughed while doing calligraphy. Circle, candle. Name your wish. That was it. I scooped out a ring of kosher salt on the scuffed floorboards. I found a half-burned birthday candle in a drawer, offensively blue, and jammed it into a bottle cap. The amulet was cool in my palm, engraved with tiny wave-like lines, hairline cracks running across its center like a spider web. This is ridiculous, I muttered, which, in hindsight, might have offended the ridiculous thing. The ceiling dripped. My lamp flickered. I sat cross-legged in the salt circle with my pizza and my bad life choices, and raised the amulet with theatrical solemnity I absolutely did not feel. Let him feel what it's like to be betrayed, I said, because I am petty and wounded and there was no one here to stop me. Let Oliver, I said his name and it tasted like tin, know exactly how it hurts. The air pressed in. Not like a storm, more like a held breath. The blue candle flame pulled itself thin, thread fine. The amulet warmed against my skin, then went outright hot, chasing up my wrist like a sting. I yelped, dropped it, and it thudded onto the wood. The shadows in the corner thickened. They became velvet. They became a doorway. Then a man stepped through the absence of light the way someone might step off an elevator, mildly inconvenienced to find me there. Tall, black cloak that should have looked ridiculous in a studio apartment, yet somehow managed menace and couture. Hair as dark as the gap between thoughts. Eyes, God, gold, like someone had poured sunrise into them and forgotten to stop. He looked at my salt circle, at the birthday candle, at the pizza. He sighed. I miss the old days, he said, voice like polished stone. Goats, incense, a sense of occasion. My brain made the sound of a dial-up modem. I said, eloquently. Hi? He tilted his head, that half-smile that knows more than you do curving his mouth. Hello, mortal. I'm assuming you meant to summon a tax accountant and took a wrong turn. No, I hauled my thoughts together. Are you a demon? His smile sharpened. Yes. The cloak was a hint, a beat. The rain patted the glass. My lamp buzzed like a fly. Okay, I said, because sometimes you just have to commit to the bit. Do you want a slice? He blinked, surprised into humanity for a fraction of a second. Then he stepped neatly over the salt line, so much for that, and plucked a triangle from the box. He took a bite, considered the flavor like a judge on a cooking show, and nodded. Greasy, mortal, acceptable. Glad my comfort food meets the infernal standard. My voice came back with my sarcasm attached. So, what now? Now, he said, licking a smudge of sauce from his thumb with a focus that made my stomach do a weird flip. We negotiate terms. But given what you just said, he pointed lazily at the air above my circle. A faint glyph pulsed there, the same lines as the amulet, glowing dull amber. Your wish has already been recorded. My wish? Let Oliver feel what it's like to be betrayed, he quoted. Pitch perfect. A wound for a wound. Poetic. Petty. Classic. Heat rushed to my face. I didn't think it would, you know. I flapped a hand at the reality of him. Work. That, he said, is a common human mistake. He took a second slice. I stared at the amulet, where it lay on the floor. Its cracks had sealed. The lines were no longer tarnished. When I reached toward it, the demon, because there was really no getting around that now, shot me a look. "Careful," he said. "It bit you once." "Who are you?" I asked. Not what, which felt like giving myself an out. Like name. He regarded me for a heartbeat, gold eyes dimming. Tired, I realized, like the way you look at the end of a very long day you can't remember starting. Then the moment was gone. The smirk sliding back into place like a shutter. "Reizen," he said. "Bound department, curses and consequences division." A laugh escaped me, too high. "You're kidding." "I wish," he said wryly. "Now. Payment." A word like a pit. "Payment?" He gestured, and I felt it, like a string tugging behind my ribs, a note plucked inside me. Not painful. Not exactly. More like noticing a draft you didn't know was there until the door closed. "Hey," I said, hand pressed flat to my chest. "What did you—" "Contracts require balance," Reizen said calmly. "You offered a desire with weight. I took the deposit, a sliver." He tapped 2 fingers against his own sternum, like we were sharing a secret. "You won't miss it." I swallowed, throat suddenly tight. A sliver of what? He considered me like he was deciding whether to be kind. "Soul is such a melodramatic word," he said lightly. "Think of it as emotional equity." "Wow," I said. "You must be a hit at parties." "When I'm invited." He brushed salt from the toe of his boot with fussy precision, then glanced at my dead-looking candle. "Your circle was charming. Ineffective, but charming." I googled it, I muttered. "Ah." He sounded genuinely pleased. A modern practitioner. I sank back on my heels. The room felt smaller, my apartment's familiar clutter suddenly stagey, like props. Outside, a siren wailed and faded. Inside, my pulse drum-rolled in my ears. "So," I said, "Oliver gets what he deserves. And then you—" "What, leave?" "Once the wish is fulfilled, the contract dissolves." He rolled his wrist, as if shedding something intangible. "You, and your very dramatic heart. Go back to your regularly scheduled programming. And, the deposit? Consider it my processing fee. You started with, 'Let him suffer.' Not, 'Teach me how to heal.' There are cheaper spells for mercy." I flinched. Not because he was cruel, he wasn't, not exactly. Because he was right. He watched me for a breath. The smirk softened. The gold in his eyes cooled to honey. "We can tailor it," he said, almost gently. "The lesson he learns. The shape of it. It's not all knives." Something unspooled in my chest, a knot, loosening. I hated that he could do that with his voice. I hated that I wanted him to. "Why do you care?" I asked before I could stop myself. For a heartbeat, the weariness was back, too old for his face. "I don't," he said, but it lacked teeth. "Sure," I said. "And I love cardio." He snorted, actual amusement. And the room's pressure eased another degree. "Eat your pizza, Aiden," he said. My name like a coin turning warm in his mouth. "You look like a haunted raccoon." Wow. Flirting or bullying? Multitasking, he said, with that curved edge of a smile. I picked up a slice, because if there was ever a time to eat cheese, it was after losing part of your emotional equity to a handsome nightmare in a cloak. My hands shook a little. The grease tasted like salt and something almost like relief. "So we're bound," I said. The word felt archaic and too intimate. "Until it's done." "Bound," Reizen agreed. He extended his hand across the salt, palm up, a gesture both handshake and dare. "Try not to bore me." I set the pizza down. I hesitated, then I put my hand in his. Cold. Not corpse cold, more like river cold, the kind that wakes you to yourself. The glyph above the circle brightened, sank into the air, and vanished with a faint ringing I felt in my teeth. A hitch in his breath. A hitch in mine. His eyes flared brighter, then steadied. Interest, I realized, not hunger. Curiosity. Where contempt should have been. "Fine," I said, glaring at the flickering lamp because I needed to glare at something. But if we're doing this, we do it my way. Excellent, he said, softly, as if that had been his plan all along. Let's teach Oliver what betrayal feels like. The rain beat harder against the window. The apartment seemed to lean in, listening. And just like that, I stopped feeling sorry for myself and started feeling something far more dangerous. I woke up to sunlight punching through my blinds and the distinct smell of cold pepperoni. For a moment I clung to the fantasy that last night had been some kind of wine-induced hallucination. Just me, my heartbreak, too much cheese, and a bad dream about a demon with gold eyes and a taste for sarcasm. Then the demon in question cleared his throat. "Your coffee's boiling over," he said, casual as anything. I shot upright in bed. My living room was in the same state as my life, disaster chic. Pizza box on the table, salt ring still smeared across the floor, a half-burned blue candle leaning sideways like it had given up on life. And there, perched on my windowsill like a morally ambiguous gargoyle, sat Reizen. Cloak gone, replaced by a black shirt that managed to look both effortless and expensive. He was scrolling through my phone with one hand, eating leftover pizza with the other. "Excuse me," I croaked, dragging a blanket around my shoulders. "Personal boundaries?" He didn't look up. "You dream about falling a lot," he said, as if reading a weather report. I blinked. "What?" "Your emotional equity," he reminded me. "Very revealing. Memories, fears, regrets. All in the fine print, Aiden." I stumbled toward the kitchen, trying not to think about what he might have seen. "So you do charge extra for privacy invasions?" "That was in the contract," he said, finally glancing up. His eyes caught the sunlight like polished coins. "Emotions fuel the spell. Your dreams, your feelings. Little sips of them keep the magic running. Side effect of binding your wish to something as volatile as revenge." I slammed the coffee pot onto the counter harder than necessary. "Great. So every time I feel something, you, what, drink it like juice?" "Metaphorically," he said, clearly amused. "Though I do prefer vintage heartbreak to the cheap stuff." I narrowed my eyes. "You're enjoying this?" "Immensely." He took another bite of pizza. "So, who's Oliver?" I froze halfway to the fridge. He noticed, of course. "Ah," Reizen said, tone rich with satisfaction. "The ex who broke the mortal's fragile little heart. Our villain enters stage left. He's not—" I stopped, because actually Oliver was the villain. At least in my personal melodrama. He cheated. That's all you need to know. Reizen studied me for a moment like he was flipping through a file no one else could see. Then he hopped off the windowsill with feline grace, stretched like someone shaking off centuries, and gestured at the door. "Let's meet him," he said. The cafe was one of those trendy places with minimalist decor and baristas who looked like failed poets. Sunlight spilled across polished tables, catching in the glass jars of artisanal sugar like the set of a commercial. Oliver sat near the window, every inch the golden boy. Hair perfectly styled, smile perfectly fake, sleeves rolled just so to show off the watch I'd given him last Christmas. He looked like heartbreak wrapped in designer linen. My stomach twisted. "Remember," Reizen murmured beside me, sounding entirely too entertained. "You wanted him to feel what betrayal tastes like." I gripped my coffee cup. "Not literally. Pity," he said. We approached the table. Oliver glanced up, his eyes widening just enough to be flattering. "Aiden," he said smoothly. "Wow. You look good." Lie. I looked like someone who hadn't slept, and maybe had a demon-shaped problem eating his emotions. "Oliver." My smile had the warmth of Antarctica. "This is Reizen," the demon corrected pleasantly, sliding into the seat beside me like he belonged there. His black shirt didn't wrinkle. His hair didn't dare. Oliver nodded, polite, already cataloging him as irrelevant. That was Oliver, charming until something bored him. The waiter came over, a kid barely 20, with a man bun, and the expression of someone composing lyrics in his head. He took our orders, gaze lingering on Oliver like the rest of the world tended to. And then, because fate hates me, The kid's thoughts spilled into the air like someone had knocked over a bucket. God, he's hot. Way out of my league, though. Probably a jerk. Definitely a jerk. Those cheekbones could cut glass. Oliver blinked. What? The kid froze. What? You said... Oliver stopped, confused. I heard... He looked at me. I sipped my coffee. Problem? The waiter shook his head violently, cheeks red, and fled toward the counter. Oliver stared after him. Okay, that was... weird. Beside me, Reizen examined his fingernails with profound innocence. Did you... I hissed under my breath. He smirked. A little nudge. Surface thoughts only. Harmless. Oliver rubbed his temple like the sun was too bright. I fought a grin. Because yes, maybe it was petty. And yes, maybe I was impressed even as I tried not to be. But watching Oliver squirm while someone's unfiltered opinion of him played out loud, that was art. Reizen leaned back, clearly enjoying himself. Consider it the appetizer, he murmured, so only I could hear. Revenge shouldn't be rushed. I glared into my coffee to hide the smile threatening my mouth. Because damn it, he was right. And maybe, just maybe, this was going to be interesting. By the time the sun dipped behind the skyline, I had questions. Too many. Like why I could now see faint shadows sliding along walls where nothing cast them. Or why the flicker of neon signs seemed to bend when Reizen walked past, like the city itself noticed him. Or why my own chest felt a little lighter every time he smirked. Like part of me kept getting siphoned away. So after Oliver's cafe meltdown and an afternoon pretending this was fine, I finally said it. Hey demon, I called as we walked down a side street lined with puddles glowing electric pink from the noodle shop sign. How much is this contract actually costing me? Reizen slowed, the heel of his boot splashing water that didn't dare stain him. He looked over his shoulder, gold eyes catching the light like a cat's. Ah, he said smoothly, the fine print. Mortals always wait until page 200 to read it. I didn't get a page 1, I shot back. I got drunk, drew a circle, and now you're haunting my emotional equity or whatever. He stopped under the flickering glow of a street lamp. The air smelled of rain and frying oil from somewhere close. When he turned fully toward me, his face was all careless humor. But there was a faint tiredness at the edge of it, like paint cracking. Your feelings power the wish, Reizen said at last. Anger, grief, nostalgia, delicious things. Think of it as a battery. The more you burn, the more I can bend the rules for you. I folded my arms. So you're basically drinking my pain like some kind of cursed energy drink? One corner of his mouth curved. And here I thought you'd be flattered to be so sustaining. That's creepy. That's contracts. He stepped closer, neon washing his coat in violet and blue. You asked for betrayal returned in kind. Emotions make the spell sharp enough to cut. It will end when he learns the lesson, or when you run out of feelings worth tasting. I didn't like the sound of that. And when it's done? I asked. Then I leave. No hesitation. Something strange tightened in my chest. Probably caffeine. Reizen glanced at the busy street behind us, the people hurrying home, the taxi lights smeared across wet asphalt. Demons don't get to keep things, he added almost idly. Not for long. The words landed heavier than I expected. We turned a corner, and that was when I noticed them. Faint outlines, lurking by the dumpsters, hunched shapes slinking along the bricks. Not people. Not animals either. What? Spirits, Reizen said, not breaking stride. Most mortals can't see them. Binding you to me. Adjusted your perspective. One of the things looked up. Its eyes were holes lit from behind, its body twitching like bad reception. I shivered. They won't touch you, he said. They can smell the contract. Comforting, I muttered, watching the shadows melt back into the walls. We reached my apartment building, the hallway light buzzing overhead like a dying bee. Mrs. Pak from 3 Billions was watering her jungle of potted plants by the stairs. Widow, cardigan collection. The sharp humor of someone who survived 3 husbands, and now owned 2 fat cats and 0 patience. She eyed Reizen the way grandmothers eye tattoos on teenagers. New boyfriend? I choked. He's not... Yes, Reizen said smoothly, offering the tiniest bow like some Victorian villain. Mrs. Pack's smile turned sly. Finally, someone with cheekbones, she said, and shuffled back into her apartment. A cat glared at us from the doorway like it knew secrets. I glared at Reizen. Seriously? He looked entirely too pleased with himself. She likes me. She thinks you're taking me to prom. His grin flashed in the dim light. Should I buy a corsage? I stomped up the stairs before I could laugh. Later, after tea, Mrs. Pock insisted on shoving into my hands, for strength. Dear. I found Reizen standing by the window in my living room. The city's neon glow edged his profile in faint pinks and blues. For once, he wasn't smirking. Hey, I said softly. You look... He turned his head. The mask snapped back into place so fast I almost doubted I'd seen the crack at all. Like a demon counting down the hours until your revenge is complete? I frowned. Like someone who doesn't sleep much. Sleep is for things with endings, he said lightly. I'm more... ongoing. I leaned against the wall, tea warm in my hands. Curiosity itched under my skin. He didn't talk like someone who felt nothing. He talked like someone who'd buried things too deep to dig up again. So, no feelings, huh? I said. His eyes glowed faintly in the dark. Not the kind you're thinking of. For some reason, that didn't make me feel any better. Oliver's office looked like the inside of a very expensive cereal box, glossy white, and so aggressively modern it felt like a dentist's waiting room that had hired a fashion consultant. I stood near the elevators, clutching my messenger bag like it contained emotional stability instead of half a granola bar and my laptop. Reizen leaned against the wall beside me, radiating the kind of calm you only get if you've either meditated for 1,000 years or ended civilizations for fun. This is ridiculous, I muttered. I can't just walk into his office and... Relax, Reizen said smoothly, straightening the cuffs of his black coat. I promised you revenge, not public indecency. I shot him a look. Define revenge. He smiled like a cat discovering a new species of mouse. The first trick was subtle. Too subtle at first. Oliver was on the phone when we passed the glass doors to his corner office, his reflection neat and perfect in the polished surface. He didn't see us. But his reflection did. I froze, because the Oliver in the glass suddenly turned its head, not the real Oliver, just the image, and mouthed something. Liar. The words smeared across the glass like breath fogging up. Oliver jerked mid-sentence, staring at the window like he'd seen a ghost. His assistant glanced up, confused. Problem? She asked. He shook his head quickly, too quickly. Beside me, Reizen's eyes gleamed gold. One, he murmured. To unsettle the target. I was already biting back a grin. The second trick came 10 minutes later. Oliver was giving a presentation to two very serious men in very serious suits. Reizen snapped his fingers lazily, and the projector behind Oliver blinked once, twice, and then displayed the wrong slideshow. Not just wrong, humiliating. Vacation photos, pool floaties, a particularly bad sunburn. Oliver spinning toward the screen, horrified as the words "work hard, play hard" scrolled cheerfully across his half-naked beach selfie. The men in suits blinked in unison. Oliver yanked the HDMI cord like he was defusing a bomb. I bit my fist to keep from laughing out loud. Reizen leaned close enough for his shoulder to brush mine. Two, he whispered, breath warm, for embarrassment. Stop enjoying this, I hissed, which was unfair because I was definitely enjoying this. By the time Oliver spilled coffee on his own keyboard, courtesy of a cup that slid 3 inches the wrong way at the wrong moment, I was laughing for real. The kind of laugh that cracked something in my chest, shaking dust off corners I hadn't realized were dark. It felt good. Too good. Reizen watched me, expression unreadable, then turned away when Oliver stormed out of his office, muttering curses. 3, Reizen said softly. Humor. The best blade. I wiped my eyes, still grinning. You're terrible. Correct. We left the building just as the rain started again, fine silver needles under the streetlights. I was still smiling when it happened, so fast I barely understood what I was seeing. One of the shadow things from last night peeled itself off the alley wall ahead, bigger than the others, edges boiling like smoke. Its eyes were holes filled with firelight, and it was looking at me. I froze. Reizen didn't. The thing lunged, too fast, claws like broken glass reaching. Reizen snapped his fingers once. The sound was sharp enough to cut the air. The spirit slammed into something invisible mid-air, shrieking like metal twisting. It burned out in a flash of pale light, leaving only scorch marks on the wet pavement. My pulse was trying to leave my body through my throat. "What?" I gasped. "The hell was that?" "Stray," Reizen said simply, scanning the shadows until he seemed satisfied they were empty. "Some spirits follow strong emotions. You've been leaking them like perfume." He turned to me then, eyes still faintly lit from whatever power he'd used. "You all right?" I swallowed hard. "Yeah, I just..." He reached out without thinking, brushing rain off my sleeve where the thing had nearly grabbed me. The touch was brief, almost careless, but his hand lingered a second longer than necessary. "Stay close," he said, voice low. We walked in silence after that. The rain softened to drizzle, blurring the city lights into watercolor smears. Reizen's coat brushed my arm once. Then again. Not accidental. I shoved my hands in my pockets so I wouldn't do something stupid like notice how warm he felt despite the rain. "Do you pull this revenge routine often?" I asked finally, mostly to hear something besides my own heartbeat. He smirked without looking at me. "Mortals keep making wishes. I keep granting them. Pattern recognition at this point. And the emotional battery thing? Side effect," he said lightly. "I give them what they ask for. They give me what they feel. Everyone leaves satisfied." His voice had that lazy cynicism again, but I kept thinking about the moment before. The way his hand had rested on my arm like he'd forgotten to act indifferent. By the time we reached my building, Oliver was probably still mopping coffee off his desk. I was damp, exhausted, and smiling in a way I hadn't since before everything went wrong. Reizen held the door open with mock formality. "After you, partner in crime." I rolled my eyes, brushing past him. "You're insufferable." Correct, again, but there was something in his tone, lighter than before, almost warm, and it left me wondering who, exactly, was getting under whose skin. The city looked different in the rain. From the bridge, the lights smeared into trembling ribbons on the river below, gold and violet, bending in the current like someone had spilled a box of melted crayons across the water. I leaned against the railing, hood up, listening to the hiss of passing tires behind us. Beside me, Reizen stood perfectly still, the rain sliding off his coat like it had been told not to touch him. "Oliver's probably praying to every god he doesn't believe in right now," I said, because humor was easier than the thoughts circling in my head. Reizen didn't answer. He was staring at the water the way people stare at old scars. I shoved my hands into my pockets. "All right," I said finally. "What's your deal?" One gold eye slanted toward me. "My deal? You keep smirking like a Bond villain, but then you..." I hesitated. "Sometimes you look like you're carrying around something." His smile flickered, thin as cigarette smoke. The rain drummed harder. Across the river, someone's apartment window glowed warm yellow. "A long time ago," Reizen said, voice even, "there was a man who wanted power enough to risk anything for it. So he summoned me, made his wish, signed his soul on the line. I waited. He was clever," Reizen went on. "Funny, annoyingly brave, always finding loopholes in contracts I hadn't noticed." The corner of his mouth twitched. "He thought he was playing me. And then one day," Reizen said, eyes still on the black water, "a spirit came for me. One of the old ones. Big, angry. He stepped in the way." Something in his voice shifted, just a fraction, like a crack in ice. I swallowed. "He died." Reizen nodded once. We stood there while the wind tried to shove the rain sideways. I didn't know what to say. Sorry felt cheap. Asking if it hurt felt stupid. "He thought he was saving me," Reizen said at last. as if that would make him some kind of hero. He let out a sound that might have been a laugh if it hadn't been so hollow. Mortals always want to rescue things that don't want rescuing. My throat was tight. Maybe you did want it. His gaze finally turned to me. The mask was still there. Lazy smirk, gold eyes like coins. But behind it, for half a second, there was exhaustion deep enough to drown in. Demons don't love, he said softly. We trade. We tempt. We survive, that's all. I heard the don't like a door slamming shut. But you cared, I said. Maybe. His jaw tightened. Didn't change anything. The rain ran cold down my collar. Somewhere far below, the river carried the city's lights out to sea. I'm not him, I said quietly. I know. For a moment we just stood there, the wind tugging at my hood, the night pressing close. Then Reizen looked away, shoulders shifting like he was rolling the conversation off of them. This is why demons don't make friends, he said, lighter again. Practiced. You start telling them things and suddenly they expect depth. I almost smiled. Horrifying concept. He shot me a sideways glance. Terrifying. But the smirk didn't quite reach his eyes. We walked back in silence. Something between us had changed, like the first crack in a wall you didn't realize was there until water found it. And for the first time since this started, I wondered what would happen when the contract ended. The thought felt like cold hands on my ribs. The revenge didn't come with fire or lightning. It came with a microphone, a charity gala, and one very unlucky Oliver. The ballroom was all glass walls and chandeliers. The kind of place that smelled like champagne money. Oliver stood at the center stage in his perfect suit, about to give the speech he'd probably practiced in the mirror for weeks. Reizen and I lingered near the back, blending in with the crowd of donors and bored rich people. Remind me, I whispered, how we got invited to this. Your ex put the guest list online, Reizen murmured, smoothing his sleeves like a cat licking its paw. Amateur mistake. Oliver adjusted the mic, smiled like he owned the city, and started thanking sponsors in that voice that used to make me weak-kneed and now just made me want to fast-forward reality. Reizen flicked his fingers once. The projector behind Oliver, the one showing the charity's logo, flickered. Once. Twice. Then it started playing Oliver's private video collection, not the scandalous kind. Reizen wasn't cruel like that. No. This was worse. This was Oliver singing off-key in his car. Oliver practicing finger guns in the mirror. Oliver tripping over his own briefcase in his office. Clips stitched together like the world's most embarrassing documentary. The audience roared with laughter. Oliver turned slowly. His perfect smile cracked like cheap plaster. Is that, someone whispered near the front, him doing the Macarena? Oliver scrambled for the remote. The video looped again. His ears turned crimson. Beside me, Reizen smirked faintly. 3 weeks of security footage, he murmured. You mortals never check your cameras. I should have felt triumphant. This was what I asked for. Poetic justice served on silver platters with caviar on the side. But as Oliver fled the stage to the sound of polite applause and too many cameras flashing, all I felt was tired. It didn't fix anything. The hole he left in me wasn't shaped like revenge after all. Outside, the rain waited. Reizen leaned against the slick marble steps, watching people scatter into limos and taxis, his gold eyes faint in the streetlight glow. That's it, he said simply. I shoved my hands into my pockets. That's it? Contract nearly complete. He didn't look at me when he said it. Once the lesson settles, I leave. The words landed like stones in my stomach. I stared at the wet pavement. And that's just how it works. That's how it works. We stood there while the rain threaded silver lines between us. You don't get to stay? My voice came out tighter than I meant. His jaw shifted, like he was about to make a joke, then didn't. Demons don't get to keep things. I laughed once, sharp and humorless. Yeah. You said that before. He finally looked at me then. Really looked. Something restless moved behind his eyes, like wind behind curtains. The rain started coming harder, cold enough to sting. I turned to say something. I don't even know what. and he was suddenly closer than I expected. 1 step. 2. Gold eyes catching the streetlight, rain dripping off his lashes, that infuriating half-smile ghosting his mouth like he couldn't decide whether to smirk or apologize. "This is a terrible idea," I said, because words were the only thing I had left. "Undoubtedly," he murmured. And then he kissed me. It wasn't careful. It wasn't polite. It was like the rain itself leaned in, like the city stopped to watch, like he'd been holding something back for a century, and just decided to stop. His mouth was cold at first, then warm, then gone too soon. When he pulled back, he looked almost startled, like maybe demons weren't supposed to feel anything at all, and yet here he was, waiting for me to breathe. I managed. That didn't feel very contractual. His smirk wobbled. Consider it a loophole, somewhere deep in my chest, behind the sarcasm and the revenge and the rain, something twisted, because I didn't want him to leave, and judging by the flicker of uncertainty, no, hope, in his eyes, maybe he didn't either. The storm hadn't stopped. Rain hammered the city like it was trying to wash it off the map. I stood in the middle of my apartment, the circle of salt and candlelight drawn fresh across the floorboards. The same way this whole mess had started. Reizen leaned against the window, arms folded, watching the lightning stutter across the skyline. His coat was still wet from the night before, rain dripping off the hem onto my rug. He didn't seem to care. "This is unnecessary," he said mildly. I knelt to set the last candle down. My hands shook, but not from the cold. "Yeah," I said. "So was the contract." He tilted his head, unreadable. "You got what you wanted." "No." I lit the wick. My voice cracked anyway. "I didn't." The storm rattled the glass as I stood, the circle glowing faintly now, runes etched in chalk like angry scars. I faced him, heart banging too loud for comfort. "I wanted revenge," I said. "I thought it would make things better. It didn't. It was just noise. It didn't fix anything inside me." He raised a brow. "Mortals always expect closure to arrive in pretty boxes. It never does." "Maybe not." My throat felt like I'd swallowed sand. "But I can give you one thing. I can let you go." Something in his face shifted. "Not much." "Enough." "Aiden?" "No," I said, louder this time. "I know how this ends. Contract fulfilled. You vanish. So I'm ending it my way." The wind shoved at the windows. Rain streaked down the glass like claws. Reizen stepped closer to the circle, gold eyes flickering in the candlelight. "Do you even know what you're doing?" "Not really," I admitted. "But I know what it feels like to be trapped. And I'm not keeping anyone else in a cage just because I'm angry." For the first time since I'd met him, he didn't have a smirk ready. I spoke the words scrawled on the paper Mrs. Pak had slipped under my door earlier, muttering about reckless boys with demons and bad decisions. The air thickened like the room was filling with water. My skin prickled. Reizen stayed still, watching me with something like curiosity under his usual calm. The circle flared white. Pain ripped through my chest like someone was pulling threads out of me one by one. My knees hit the floor. "Mortals," Reizen said softly, almost to himself. The runes on the floor burned brighter. My vision blurred. It felt like peeling off my own shadow. And then, the bond snapped. Not quietly. It broke with a sound like every storm in the world inhaling at once. I looked up, gasping. The glow of the circle faded, leaving only smoke and the sharp smell of ash. Reizen stood just outside it, no longer tethered to me by anything but the rain still dripping from his hair. "You're free," I managed. My voice sounded wrecked. He stepped closer, right to the edge of the circle. Studied me the way someone studies the horizon before leaving it behind. And then, finally, he smiled. Not the smirk, not the half-laugh. Something quieter, stranger. "Aiden," he said, like testing the weight of the name one last time. Before I could answer, the wind caught the candles, snuffing them out. And he was gone. The apartment was silent except for the storm outside. I sat on the floor shaking, empty in ways I didn't have words for. But under the exhaustion, under the ash and the ache, there was something else. Strength, maybe. Or hope. For the first time since this whole thing began, the air felt like it actually belonged to me. 3 days passed. 3 days of rain-slick streets, lukewarm coffee, and the kind of silence that settled in your bones. The apartment felt too big without someone leaning against the window making sarcastic comments about my decor choices. I told myself I didn't notice. I lied. So when the air in my living room rippled like heat off asphalt and Reizen stepped, out of nothing, no glow, no contract, no storm, I nearly dropped the mug in my hands. You. My voice cracked halfway. You're not supposed to be here. He looked exactly the same. Black coat, gold eyes, that maddening calm like he owned the floorboards under his boots. But there was something different too, something quieter around the edges, like the sharpness had been filed down. "Hello to you too," he said. I set the mug down before I could throw it at him. "You disappeared. Dramatically, might I add. People grieve, you know." One brow arched. "You grieved?" "Shut up," I muttered. He smiled then, real, slow, none of the smirk he wore like armor. "I left because the contract was over. I came back because—" He hesitated, choosing the words like they might break. "Because now I can—" Something in my chest loosened all at once. I covered it with sarcasm because of course I did. "So this isn't about emotional equity or revenge energy or whatever. No contracts," he said softly. "No rules, just me." I stared at him, at the rain dripping off his coat, the faint glow in his eyes, the way he looked at me like maybe he'd been wandering too long. "That's cheating," I said finally. "You can't just show up like some kind of romantic cliché. Would you prefer lightning and a declaration of undying love?" His tone was pure amusement now. "Yes," I said flatly. "With flowers. And maybe a mariachi band." He actually laughed, low and warm, like something I hadn't heard from him before. "You're impossible," he said. "Correct." We stood there with the rain tapping the windows, the silence between us different this time. Lighter, easier. "So what now?" I asked, quieter than I meant to. Reizen stepped closer, not the way demons moved, smooth and sharp, just walked, like he was choosing it. "Now," he said, "we see what happens without chains." It wasn't a promise, but it was something better. I smiled despite myself, shaking my head. "You're still arrogant, and you're still here," he said simply. Somehow, that felt like enough. Spring crept back into the city like it had been waiting for us to stop brooding. The rain finally ran out, the sun returned, and my apartment windows stopped rattling like ghosts were trapped in the glass. Reizen was on my couch reading one of Mrs. Pak's romance novels. Reading like demons. Did this sort of thing every day, and drinking tea he swore he hated but never refused. Across the room, Mrs. Pak herself was feeding her cats and smirking at him, like she'd seen 1,000 impossible things, and this one amused her the most. "So," she said, stirring sugar into her own mug. "You're keeping him?" I almost choked on my tea. "Mrs. Pak." "What?" she asked innocently. "You let a demon move in, dear. People talk." Reizen didn't look up from the book. "I'm very tidy," he said. "Hardly any blood rituals indoors." "Yet," I muttered. Mrs. Pak beamed at me. "Domestic already. How nice." I gave up trying to win this conversation. Later, after she left with her cats and her gossip, the apartment felt quieter but not empty. Reizen set the book aside and stretched out like he'd been here his whole life. "No contracts," he said lazily, eyes half closed. "No chains." Plenty of sarcasm though, I pointed out. "Essential." We sat there with the window open, spring air sliding in like the city was finally forgiving us both for something. "So what now?" I asked. Reizen's smile was small, real, the kind that didn't need shadows or smirks to hide behind. "Now," he said, "we start over. No bargains, no revenge, just possibilities." It wasn't a grand promise. It didn't need to be. Somewhere outside, a street musician was butchering a love song. Mrs. Pak's cat yowled in protest. The kettle whistled on the stove because neither of us remembered to turn it off. And for the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like a door slamming shut. it felt like one creaking open,